26 January 1946. Cell, British Zone. In a narrow, borrowed bed, a Silesian girl named Anneliese K. writes, "We live in rooms that are not ours, we eat bread measured by guilt and luck, and we learn to keep our questions to ourselves." It is a dangerous sentence. It admits what no one says aloud, that the arithmetic of survival in West Germany after 1945 is built on subtraction. Rooms subtracted from locals, food subtracted from rations, words subtracted from the truth. Her town is not. Her school is not her school. Even her name, pronounced in the soft Silesian way, sounds foreign in markets along the Aller. The first months after surrender have a geometry. Allied maps, street grids turned to rubble, the neat lines of occupation zones. And inside those boxes, lives moving by measure, daily, weekly, monthly. Curfew hours, ration coupons, registration forms. Celle is a garrison town. British MPs with armbands, a checkpoint at the edge of the old town. The old town itself still standing compared to Hanover and Hamburg, but scraped by war. Timbered houses lean. Cellars are survival rooms. In the mornings, thin smoke. In the evenings, the church clock counting hours to curfew. There is a mathematics to rubble. It is counted by the cubic meter. Women haul it in baskets. Trümmerfrauen. Their photos will be kept in municipal archives, headscarves, gloves cut from men's old socks, faces set in the blank concentration of lifting and hauling. They make new piles from old walls. They salvage intact bricks, knock the mortar off, stack them in neat bundles. It is precise work. It has a rhythm. 1, 2, 3. Pick, knock, stack. The effort is loud, then whispers to silence when curfew empties the street. In those weeks, there is also the arithmetic of fear. Fear of retribution, rumors. The Russians in the east, the British in the west, French in the southwest, Americans in the south. Each rumor is a mathematical function applied to daily choices, where to walk, what to say, whom to trust. British occupation reports describe these calculations with cold phrases: populace acquiescent, cooperation adequate, shortage of coal, causing unrest. OMS, Office of Military Government, memoranda use the word stability. The word is paper thin. Spring turns to summer, then to a winter remembered two ways: in diaries as hunger, in reports as climate. January 1947 is the coldest in memory. The hunger winter. Municipal ledgers show heating coal at 0. The average adult allotment drops toward 1,000 calories. It is not enough. In the arithmetic of calories, the body is divided by the day, and still there is remainder. People pick wood from railroad embankments at night. They strip trees in the park. Women with axes in courtyards split planks from bombed-out beams. British patrols look away. In econometric summaries generated in district headquarters, a line notes, "Increase in petty wood theft, recommend leniency." Black markets expand when rationing contracts. In Schellers Gensumarsch Alley, you can trade a wedding ring for butter, or 5 packs of American cigarettes for a bag of flour. The currency is nicotine. Tobacco is confidence. Men who never smoked learn fast. Women with short haircuts and quick fingers wrap cigarettes in newspaper, count them in 5s, stick them in the front pocket of their coat, and walk. British notes report barter of manufactured items for food, black market persistent. It is a phrase for something that feels like breathing. The arithmetic of the black market is simple. Goods move where scarcity meets surplus. When Americans pass through with duffel bags and lucky strikes, those packs are converted into potatoes up the river. Men with bicycles load panniers. Coal, rye, lard, soap. The calculus of survival is improvised but precise. Early in the cool air, the bargains are quick. By afternoon, patrols have options: warnings, confiscations. Sometimes, arrested boys are released to their mothers with a nod and a lecture about stability. Annelise's family arrives on a train pushed by a shunting engine on a siding near the old depot. June 1946. They are part of an organized transport, one of thousands. In the British zone, trains from Lower Silesia and Pomerania are counted by the week. Allied intelligence summaries tally heads. Occupation files label them refugees or expellees. Heimat Vertriebene. The words are bureaucratic. The lives are not. She comes from Nysa, the old Nysa, now in Poland. Their house had a garden. Her father kept bees. In January 1945, when the Soviet offensive bursts through, they left with a handcart. Her father went missing at the Oder. He writes once in late March from a hospital bed in Görlitz, then never again. The missing are a category in every town hall. Card index drawers full of names, incoming inquiries, outgoing forms. Abgang unbekannt, unknown. The arithmetic of absence is a whole traced on paper. The expulsion is impersonal in organization and intimate in effect. Polish authorities assemble repatriation commissions. German families are issued notices. Move in 1 hour, 2 hours, no time to pack books, no time to take letters. They carry what their arms can carry and tie the rest to carts. Later, in British reports, these are organized transfers. In Bundesarchiv records, they appear as schedules, origin, number of persons, estimated arrival. Somewhere between origin and arrival, a generation loses its home. In Celle, locals see them as pressure, rooms, jobs, bread. The arithmetic of scarcity is unforgiving. The district maintains a ledger of housing. Every habitable dwelling unit is listed. Occupants per room are computed. The housing office issues notices. Wohnungskommissar, a clerk with a brushed suit and a stamp, visits and says who must share with whom. It is measured in square meters per person. It is not fair, but it is administered. This is where Karl enters the story. Karl B., born 1912, bank clerk before the war, NSDAP member as of 1937. Not a leader. A follower. His Fragebogen lists Mitläufer. A follower, the fourth category. He insists he needed the job. He signs an affidavit from a neighbor. A Perselschein. He is assigned to the Municipal Housing Office in the summer of 1946. After the British major, in charge of civil affairs, notes, competent, non-compromised persons in short supply. The office needs clerks who can add. He does numbers, square meters, bed spaces, ration entitlements. He measures families, 3 persons, 4, 6. He calculates Zumutbachit, the tolerability of squeezing one more family into one more room. He becomes, for a time, the man who knocks on doors with a file and says someone will come. And they do, with blankets and a wicker suitcase. The British call this billeting. German law calls it billeting. German law calls it what they call it, quietly, at night and to themselves. Anneliese and her mother are billeted with a widow on the edge of town. The widow is bitter. Her son did not return from Stalingrad. The first weeks are cold. The girl and her mother sleep with their clothes on. They burn a chair. It is the one the widow's son always sat in. Everyone knows. No one names it. Denazification is an overlay of forms on top of this. Forms on fear, forms on hunger. It is a mathematics of guilt the occupation tries to solve with categories. There are 5 major offenders, Hauptschuldig, offenders, belastet, lesser offenders, minder belastet, followers Mitläufer, and exonerated entlastet. The Fragebogen is long. 31 questions. Clubs, positions, memberships. Were you present at any concentration camp? The Sprechkammer hearings are held in beer halls, school auditoriums, commandeered offices. Panels are staffed by anti-Nazi Germans. British or American officers watch. There are stacks of files, thick. People write affidavits for each other. He gave me bread in 1944. He was always kind to Jews. He never wore his badge. In the arithmetic of guilt, the majority falls into followers and exonerated. The system is overloaded. It needs teachers. It needs policemen. It needs clerks. It needs the apparatus of normal sodality. In denazification files, sentences are measured in months, in fines, in bans from employment that are then shortened. A teacher banned for 5 years is reinstated in 2. An engineer with NSDAP membership is indispensable at the gasworks. He returns with a note in his file. Karl watches these papers move across his desk. He stamps them. He records them in a ledger. The ink is black. The decisions are grey. At the school where Anneliese will later teach, the older staff has been sorted. One is retired, one barred. One returns with a Mittelwerfer classification. In the staff room is a poster printed by the British. Democracy must be learned. The words are fresh. The room is not. The window frames hold tape from the last bombing. The glass buckles a little in strong wind. DPs, displaced persons, live in a camp outside Siel, Bergen-Belsen. The name carries a weight the town learns to avoid. There is a geography of denial in those years. The camp is there, but people do not go. Survivors walk into town sometimes to barter. They are thin. They speak German with an accent or none at all, and Yiddish and Polish and Russian. Their eyes are guarded. UNRRRA runs the camp at first. Then the IRR. The British allow them autonomy. A Jewish police force patrols the camp. There are schools, a theatre, a newspaper, Unser Stimme. Our voice. In the bounds of wire and wood, they build a life after catastrophe. In a British intelligence summary, there is a line, local Germans show curiosity mixed with indifference toward DP camp, tension occasional. Anneliese remembers something different. She remembers a morning in August 1946, the first time she saw the sign near the road. She remembers her mother's hand on her elbow. Nicht schauen. Do not look. She looked anyway. A woman in a blue dress walked past them. She walked as if she was still in a place with rules, head up, shoulders straight. She did not look at Anneliese. She looked ahead. It is one of the few times in those years that the girl reads history, not in a book, but in the posture of a living person. Contact is not confession. Some German archives hold letters from Jews in DP camps, addressed to former homes, former neighbors, asking for news of relatives, asking for receipts, asking for moral inventory. Many go unanswered. Some are returned with bureaucratic notations, Empfänger unbekannt Versorgen. Addressee moved without a forwarding address. The mathematics of denial has its paperwork. In school, the British bring new textbooks. They ban old ones. They ban maps with lines that are no longer allowed. Teachers turn maps to the wall. Kids learn to draw borders differently. Occupation authorities approved, the stamp says on the inside of new books. These civics texts are cautious. They emphasize the structure of democracy. They describe the Weimar Republic's failures in bland chapters. They use the passive voice. The Holocaust is not yet a word in school. The bombing of cities and the expulsion from the East are the topics students can speak about at home and be understood. Lessons make the accessible audible. The harder truths wait at the margins. In 1948, when the Marshall Plan begins to deliver more than talk, a different arithmetic enters the ledger. Soap with English on the wrapper, milk powder, canned meat, machines, trucks with stars. ERP shipments are recorded in district offices. The crates are stamped with symbols of a foreign confidence. Food for children, fuel for factories, Photos taken at the time show men in flat caps unloading crates with the cautious speed of people who have not seen abundance in a long time. A date is recorded in every German brain of a certain age, 20 June 1948. Currency reform. New notes. The Deutsche Mark appears overnight. People line up at distribution points. Each adult receives a small amount. The black market collapses in hours. Shop windows fill with goods that had been hidden in back rooms. This is not magic, it is policy. But the feeling is magic. Self-accounted silences become less necessary when one can buy butter with money that means something. British political officers call it psychological. German newspapers in the British zone run columns of numbers, prices, wages, rations. The columns line up. That is a comfort. Annelies is 18 in 1949. The Basic Law is signed in Bonn in May. The Federal Republic is proclaimed. Elections are held. Konrad Adenauer, a name on posters in markets, becomes Chancellor. Stability is a program. Integration into the West is an aim. Annelies's mother votes. It is her first free vote. Perhaps in her lifetime. In their room, with the curtain closed, they talk about what was and what will be. They do not talk about what could have been. In those years, a shortage of teachers becomes a policy problem. Men are dead. Many of those living are barred or discouraged or tired. The British and German education officials organize Nottelhara courses, emergency teacher training. Institutions that had been shuttered reopen in attenuated form. Pädagogische Akademie in Hanover, Braunschweig, Oldenburg. The courses are short. The content is stripped of ideology. Or it believes it is. They teach methods, reading, numbers, a little civics. They teach the difference between obedience and responsibility. They claim to. Annelies applies at a recruiting office on a side street in Hanover. Her file is thin. A school certificate. A letter from the head of the camp school in Celle praising her help with younger children. No Persilschein is needed. She is too young to be held to account. That is one of the secret advantages of her generation. She is assigned to a course in Lüneburg. She learns to plan lessons, to write on a chalkboard without turning her back on the class for too long, to handle a room of 45 children, then 55, then 65. She learns to ignore the sound of two classes reciting in the same building at the same time because there are not enough rooms. The arithmetic of chairs becomes part of her professional life. She is assigned to a village outside Uelzen. The school is a brick building with 2 classrooms. The windows leak. The stove is small. The pupils are a mixture. Farmers' children, war orphans boarding with relatives, expellee children with rough accents and rougher shoes. She writes in her diary on the first day, "They are hungry, and they look at my hands when I write with the stub of chalk as if it were food." She writes, "I will teach them to write their names, and also to write this place as home." The village has its own arithmetic. 1 baker, 1 inn, 1 shop that sells sugar sometimes, 1 war memorial with new names written in the old style. Every Sunday, the pastor mentions the missing. Officially, the village is not political. Unofficially, everyone remembers who saluted too quickly in 1933. No one says it aloud. People meet at the inn and talk about potatoes, the weather, the road to Uelzen. The pastor says a sentence about forgiveness, and no one says it back. Karl moves from housing to the education office. He processes applications for teacher posts. He matches names to positions. He looks at files. He sees the classification, Mitläufer, on older teachers and adds notes in pencil. Versetzung nach Prüfung möglich. Transfer possible after review. The office receives a letter from a British officer about a former headmaster. The village council wants reinstated. The officer writes in measured prose about democratic reliability, a phrase that comes to mean he is useful. Karl staples the letter to the file and stamps it. He sees also the Lastenausgleich forms, the equalization of burdens. The law is passed in 1952. It taxes property and capital to compensate those who lost everything in the East. It is a bureaucratic recognition of a moral arithmetic. It is imperfect. It brings money to expellees in dribs. It is a proof of belonging. You must belong to be compensated. The office fills with people trying to make their case in numbers: hectares lost, livestock forfeited, tools left behind. The files are thick with lists that begin with cows and end with Sunday suits. The human need to transform loss into inventory is as old as grief. The state tries to keep up. The tension between locals and newcomers is chronic but not terminal. It is managed. Ration cards do not track origin. Shops ask for coupons, not birthplaces. The British do not allow political organizing by expellee groups at first. Then they do. The Bund der Heimat Vertriebenen and later the Bund der Vertriebenen press their claim: the right to a homeland, the right to remembrance, the right to remembrance, the right to compensation. In village squares, men with captured voices speak in measured staccato about the East. Their audience is those who do not have the luxury of forgetting because they have no soil to forget on. Anneliese's mother attends meetings for a while. She stops. Her home has shrunk to a room and then expanded to a village. The slogans Heimat are a comfort for some whose stomachs have stopped growling. For others, they are a reminder that the past does not fit in a political speech. From 1948 onward, the economic graphs tilt upward: output, productivity, employment. The words acquire capital letters: Wirtschaftswunder. The miracle is material and managerial. The Marshall Plan matters. But so does policy. So does hard work. So does the hunger of a nation redirected into factories. In Celle, new workshops open. In the Ruhr, blast furnaces relight. In Wolfsburg, a car designed in another regime becomes a symbol with rounded fenders. The British at first call Volkswagen a minor plant. It becomes the locomotive of a new consumer identity. The historian's footnote reads, "The combination of currency stabilization, integration into Western markets, and pent-up demand produced a sustainable growth dynamic." The shop window reads, "Bananas." In schools, more books, new books. Civics classes begin to feel less like foreign indoctrination and more like local common sense. The basic law looks different when there is a roof over your head that you can imagine owning one day. The kids bring their father's stories or silence. A boy writes an essay about his father's captivity in France. A girl writes about the night her building burned. Anneliese reads them and marks them with a red pencil she bought at a real shop that morning, not a bartered stub. She returns the essays and says little. She is learning the pedagogy of restraint. She is learning when to correct spelling and when to leave the past in the sentence the child chose. The contact with the victims of crimes committed in their name remains intermittent. There are films shown in town halls. Death Mills, the American documentary. People watch with tight faces. Some leave, some stay and do not speak at home. In 1950, a former forced laborer from Ukraine returns with an official paper to retrieve a radio he left in a barn in 1944. The farmer says it is gone. The man shows his paper. The farmer shrugs. There is no resolution. It is recorded as dispute unresolved in a police report. The man walks to the station. He sits on a bench with his hat in his hands. A woman passes and leaves a piece of bread next to him. There is the mathematics of mercy. It cannot be scaled. In 1953, Berlin erupts. The uprising in the East is heard on radios in the West as the background thrum of history. It becomes another factor in the Cold War arithmetic. It helps fix the West German place in the West. It hardens Adenauer. The "On mich" movement, without me, grows as a phrase for people who will not march again. Rearmament is debated. The veterans do not all speak. The widows watch. The village school continues with addition and reading aloud, and the children who memorize rivers and towns are memorizing also, without knowing which arguments to avoid at dinner. By 1955, the Federal Republic joins NATO. It receives sovereignty in stages. The British troops remain in Silesia. They are no longer occupiers. They are allies with housing in new settlements. Some shop in the same stores. Their children go to separate schools. Anneliese teaches a civics lesson about the Bundestag and the Bundesrat. She shows a picture of Bonn, the awkward capital. A boy asks when the capital will return to Berlin. She says, "That is a question for later." That same year, a teacher who had been banned in 1946 returns to the school. He has been reviewed and classified a Mitläufer. He signs a loyalty oath to the new constitution. He sits in the staff room with a porcelain cup and tells a story about training in 1937 at a seminar where they taught Rassenkunde. He says, "We were wrong," but he says it softly and perhaps to the tea rather than to the room. The school has one staff room. The past and the present share a table because there are not enough tables. In 1957, the school receives new textbooks. They mention National Socialism in a chapter lengthened by 2 pages. They teach about dictatorship, crimes, and lessons. They still focus on German suffering more than German crimes. Public commemorations show this balance. The firebombing of cities. The dead of the East Front. The expellees. Memorial stones have more than one story carved into one slab. The arithmetic of remembrance is also the mathematics of majorities. Teachers like Anneliese navigate these syllabi with care. In her notes, she underlines a sentence, "Explain moral agency without shaming children for their parents." She tries. She also marries. Not Karl. Her husband is a carpenter who repairs roofs. He was in the Luftwaffe ground crew. He calls that lucky. They have a child. The child is born into a country of money that works and trains that go on time. He calls that normal. The mother keeps a box under the bed with letters from before and after the flight. She takes it out sometimes when the boy is asleep and sometimes when he is not. She reads. She remembers. She returns the letters to their envelope with a chalky hand that smells like school. Karl remains a civil servant. He has moved from housing to the education office to the general administration. He processes the 131 law. Section 31 of the Basic Law allows many of those dismissed during and after the war to be reinstated or compensated. It is the bureaucratic conclusion of the denazification era, a calculation that the state needs experience and that guilt has a statute of administrative limitations. He signs forms that employed men like him again, carefully. Not because he thinks they are innocent, because the office is busy. He is also the liaison to the municipal committee organizing a new war memorial. The old one was for 1914-1918. The new plaques fit onto the old base. The inscription mentions the fallen of 1930-1945 and the missing. It does not mention anything else. An alternative inscription mentioning victims of fascism is proposed in a draft and then struck. One member of the committee says, "It is not the right time." The phrase is repeated. It becomes a lever to move moral time to somewhere comfortable. The mathematics of guilt in West Germany becomes an algebra of substitution. Words stand for other words. Verstrickung. Entanglement stands for collaboration. National catastrophe. National catastrophe. National catastrophe stands for national responsibility. Vergangenheitsbeurteigung, coming to terms with the past, will later stand for the long, uneven process of looking directly at facts. In the 1950s, many declensions are not yet spoken. Around 1959, a wave of trials begins in West Germany. Ulm, then Frankfurt. The SS Salvektor in Ulm are prosecuted. In Frankfurt, the large Auschwitz trials begin in 1963. But already in 1959, newspaper columns run headlines that force unfamiliar nouns onto familiar eyes. The security men in Karl's office clip the articles and file them in a folder labeled Public Reactions. Reaction is mild. Life is demanding. The factories run. The schools teach. The soccer club wins. The past will be looked at later or by someone else. The arithmetic of attention says that a man with a job and 2 children will focus on the job and the children. Anneliese, in those years, does something small and enormous. She starts a quiet unit in her class about reading letters. She brings in a letter from 1944 written by a soldier to his family that she found in a stack of paper used to wrap bread. She reads it to the class. She asks them to imagine the person who wrote it. Then she brings in a letter from 1946, a letter written by a Jewish survivor in the DP camp asking about the fate of a silver candlestick left with a neighbor. She reads it. She asks them to imagine the person who wrote it. The room is silent. A boy coughs. The stove ticks. The letters are thin pieces of paper. They weigh more than the textbook. None of this is in the curriculum. She teaches it anyway. The school inspector never asks. The Cold War organizes memory. It tells people which past helps the future. The expellees are integrated as voters and consumers and club members. They are promised that the East remains part of the national imagination. It is a promissory note that will be fulfilled differently than those men give to themselves on village squares. In 1961, when the Berlin Wall goes up, the line between 2 Germanys becomes a physical fact. Men who said, later, realize that later is cinder block and barbed wire. He who said, it is not the right time, has his answer. British forces in Cell reduce their profile but remain present. Their children play football on their own fields. Once, a teacher from the British school in town and Anneliese meet at a training day about new methods of teaching reading. The British woman talks about phonics and plays an example. The German woman nods. They drink tea. They do not talk about 1945. There is a method to avoidance. It keeps the room warm. Karl writes in a notebook he keeps in his desk at the office, under the blotter. He writes in a tidy script he learned before the Nazi years made handwriting a political act. He begins a new page with a date. 17 October 1962, Celle. We built our house on files. We stamped the years. We replaced looking with counting. He uses the phrase, the war after the war, once, then crosses it out. He writes, the front line is here, in these papers. It is in the question whether to sign an ordinance surnaming the new estate after 20 July or 17 June, whether to allocate an apartment to the family with 2 small children from Breslau or the old widow whose son died in 1943. It is in the decision to reinstate a teacher with a party book or not. It is arithmetic that pretends to be morality, and morality that must pretend to be arithmetic. He remembers the day he walked into the widow's house to billet Anneliese and her mother. He did not know her name then. He knows it now. He processed her appointment as a teacher. He remembers the square of cold floor where he stood and the way the house held its breath. He writes, people tell themselves stories that we did not know, that we could not choose, that the Allied posters about democracy were rude, that our suffering negates their suffering. The sums do not add up. So we change the numbers until they do. Somewhere between 1946 and 1962, the girl from Silesia became a woman with a classroom and a file in his office. The refugee child implausibly helped feed the village's future. The village's past placed its furniture in her path. She walked around it with grace that is not the same as forgiveness. He admires that without the vocabulary to name it. He writes something like that in the notebook and then rephrases it with fewer adjectives. He does not confess. He is not a villain. He is an ordinary man with numbers that have turned into weather. He does his work. He goes home. He is the one who sees the city from above because his office, unlike most, has a map on the wall and pins stuck to it where new housing estates will go. He sees that the city is changing shape. He sees that this is what victory looks like when it comes to people who lost a war. Housing plans with street names that do not mention the dead. He watches, in 1963, headlines from Frankfurt about a trial that brings young prosecutors into court to demand Germany look at itself. His son argues with him at dinner. His son says, "You are all to blame." He says, "You were not alive then." The argument has no winner. It is part of the arithmetic of living in a country that has been divided by more than a line. Some evenings, he walks past the school where Anneliese teaches and hears voices chanting multiplication tables. He thinks, we are teaching them to count in a land that had to learn to count again. He thinks, we asked children to make moral calculations we could not. He thinks these sentences, but does not write them. He writes numbers. He writes dates. He writes a final sentence on a blank page one winter afternoon, after a day of stamping Lasternaust-like papers and approving a plaque that leaves out the name of the camp on the edge of town because it is not the right time. He writes with the flat force of a man who has learned that honest lines are dangerous. He writes, "The front line after 1945 ran through my memory and my paperwork, not across a battlefield."